Okay, so in this video we're going to be talking about a few different games that are either solo games or games that have a solo mode. And the point is to demonstrate some varieties in the way that solo tabletop games build some uncertainty and variability into the game that you don't get because there's no other players that you're playing against. So that human element that makes games so interesting is not there. So how do games build this kind of thing in? Okay, so we're starting with a game called Onirim, which is a card game, and this is for 1 or 2 players, although the single player mode is probably more popular. And the deck builds in variability in a couple of ways and uncertainty, in that you're drawing cards just like a lot of card games, and you don't know what you're going to get. And also, you know that things are in here that are both good and bad, but you're not sure when you're going to encounter them. So the basic idea with Onirim is that you're trying to go through the deck, and before the deck runs out, you're trying to obtain 8 door cards. So this is there's 4 different colors. So there are door cards that are red, green, blue, and tan, and 2 of each. So there's 8 total. And so the deck acts like a timer. Because if you get to the end of the game and you need to end of the deck and you need to draw a card and you can't, then you lose. And this is not a scoring game. At the end of the game, you don't have a score. You either met your goal or you ran out of time. There are 3 different symbols on these cards, which are called location cards: key, sun, and moon. And the trick is that you're playing cards one at a time. You're trying to get runs of 3 of the same color, but you can't play the same symbol back to back. So that presents a source of opposition and tension there. And also, another source of tension is with these key cards. They're normal cards like the sun and moon, but they also help you get doors by themselves, like in a second way. And so they're valuable, and you don't want to use them just to play them because you'd like to hang on to them for that other purpose, but sometimes you can't. And then we will also see another sort of nasty thing that happens when you play that builds in more of that uncertainty and tension. So you start with a hand of 5 cards. So you can see we've set aside any doors because we don't start with any doors in our hand. And this is a nightmare card. We'll get to that in a second. So we're getting the 5 cards that are not nightmare cards or door cards, and these would get shuffled back in. And okay, so at the start of my turn, I play a card, and I want to keep the key cards if I can, so I'm going to play a moon card. And again, remember, we're hoping for runs of 3 of a kind of a certain color, but we can't put 2 moons next to each other or 2 suns next to each other. Once we're down a card because we've played one, we will draw a card. Now, this is a nightmare card. I said bad things happen when you draw a nightmare card, as you might guess. So this goes down here, and we have to do one of 4 nasty things. We can either discard a key card, and they're really valuable, so you don't really want to do that. Or if we had found a door card, we could put it back into what's called a limbo pile, which means it's going to eventually get shuffled back into the deck. So it's a way of losing progress. So as time is marching on, now you may have had 5 doors out of the 8 that you needed to win, and now you have 4. So that's not good either, but we don't have any door cards, so we couldn't even do that if we wanted. We could reveal the top 5 cards and discard all of them, so that runs out the clock faster. Or we could discard our entire hand and then draw back up again. Now, this hand is way too valuable because it's got 2 key cards, so we would probably discard a card there. So this would get discarded, and the nightmare would get discarded. Then we would draw back up to 5 cards, and another nightmare. So you'd have to do that same sort of tough choice of 4 things to do again. And in this case, I don't know, do I want to burn my next key card, or do I want to maybe burn 5 cards from the top of the deck? So yeah, this is a really bad sort of start to the game here. So I'm going to decide to discard the top 5 cards of the deck. except door or nightmare cards. So that's actually going to go back in. And so I lost a key there, another nightmare card. Wow. Another key. This was the worst choice ever. Okay, so those would all get discarded. And now my deck is that much smaller, and all these nightmares are going back into the deck. So again, sort of pulling back from the point here for our purposes is that there's no AI in the sense that we're not playing against a simulated opponent. And there's some uncertainty here in both in terms of when are we going to get certain things, and then as we draw, we're hoping for certain things. So if my next play was the sun here, then I'd be hoping for maybe another blue moon, because that would allow me to get a run and finally get a door. Instead, I get a green door. I would check against to see if I had any green keys, which I don't. So that would get shuffled back in, and I would have to go from there. So this is it's pretty innovative little card game, but it's doing something very common that we do in solo games, which is we find ways to add uncertainty to the game so that it feels like you don't know if you're going to win or lose as the game is going on. And actually, Onirim is really good for this, because oftentimes it seems like it comes down to the very end where you have 6 or 7 doors, and it could go either way until the very end of the game. So next we're going to take a look at a print and play game that pulls out most of this randomness, except at the very beginning of the game, and actually pulls out all of the hidden information. So most solo games have some randomization process that helps vary things from play to play, as well as hidden information. It might be even just on a deck of cards which you don't know what the next turn is going to reveal, like we saw with Onirim. This is a game that's one of the current 9-card print and play design contest entries, and the art is amazing. But I want to demonstrate this because it's a solo game that uses no randomness after the setup is done, and there's no hidden information. So it's a purely sort of puzzly kind of approach to this, where you have all the information you need, and it's about how many levels deep you can think. So just let me tell you a little bit about this, how this game works. You are playing a set of 3 forest heroes. It's called Forest Guardians, by the way. And so this is one of them, a hero named Valor. And each of the heroes has 5 hit points, and some of them are light colored and some of them are dark, and then when you get your 5th point of damage, then you die and you have to flip it over to that side. So you have access to all 3 of these heroes, and you start with full health, and then you have 6 enemies, and the only thing that's random is which of the 5 you're going to play with. So one of them is going to randomly not get chosen, so I'm just going to do a shuffle here and pull one aside, and then also the order is randomized. So it's supposed to be in sort of a half circle, but it'll be easier for you to see everything if I do it like this. So on your turn, what you're doing, let me just put the hit points for the enemies, who also have 5 each. And you're going to choose a hero, one of your 3 heroes on each turn. So let's say that we do go with Valor. And pick this up so you can see it. And so Valor has full health right now, so she uses her top ability here. Immediately after the enemy's turn, heal 1 health point to one hero. Well, nobody's hurt yet, but she will be before the enemy's turn is over. So this here says there's no die rolling like you'd imagine with a lot of combat games. Instead, from left to right, there's this 5 enemies here, right? And the number is how much damage each of them takes. And then on the enemy's turn, which comes next, the number of skulls from each enemy determines how much damage they do to Valor. So we can put this here, and we can see that Valor is going to give 1 point of damage to this first enemy, 0 damage here, And this actually triggers this this ability of that enemy. It says if attacked, immediately deal back 1 damage. So even though it's a 0, it's still an attack. So she takes 1 damage. Enemy 4 is going to take 1 damage. Enemy 6 in this position here is not going to take any, and then enemy 2 here is there. So that's Valor's turn. And then the enemies left to right do their thing. So if not attacked this turn, but it was, so nothing. We already dealt with that one because it was an automatic sort of damage back. This one was attacked, so that doesn't trigger. This one was not attacked, so that doesn't trigger. And then this one doesn't, attacks are worth double, but that's not going to come into play. So she takes 1 damage from enemy 1 because of the skull here, and 1 damage from enemy 6 because of the skull here. So she's taken 3 damage, so she's already pretty badly hurt, but after the enemy's turn, she gets to heal back 1. Then she would go back, and on the next turn, I could pick her or any of the other enemies, or heroes, so long as they're still alive. So that's how Forest Guardians works, and the reason why I'm showing this to you again is because unlike a lot of solo games where the uncertainty comes from randomness throughout the game, the only randomness in this game is at the very beginning when you draw 1 card to not be in play. So this was the enemy. You can tell the enemies are all cats, and the heroes are all mice. So this enemy was pulled out of the deck. And the 5 other enemies are also randomized in terms of their order, left to right, and that adds enough variety and randomness at the very beginning of the game to give there some more replayability. But once you're set up, it's a completely full information, nothing is hidden, there's no die rolls, there's no card flips, and so this game is interesting because of that lack of randomness. There's no luck once setup is complete. So this is Viticulture, or part of it, and this is a worker placement game where up to, I think, 6 people vie to build the best vineyard by planting vines and then harvesting grapes and turning them into wine and then selling them, and they get visitors in the summer and winter, and they can build other structures around the vineyard, and so that's the basic idea. And this is a game that has a solo mode based on the Automa system, which simulates an opponent. So if you're playing by yourself, you start off with 3 workers. They look like little meeples. And you get one that's a grande. He's a little bit bigger than the regular one. And we don't need to go into what they can do. For the purposes of this video, we're focusing on what the Automa opponent does. So this is an AI, and it's built to do what real live opponents would do if you were playing a multiplayer game. So on your turn, you get to place a worker somewhere that you want to do a certain task that you need to do at that phase of the game. So for example, at the beginning of the game, you might draw green cards, which are up here. You can't really see them, but that's where you have vines, so you can plant things in your fields. Here you can plant those vines, you can sell grapes to other people, or you can sell a field if you're not going to use it for your own wine. You can draw cards for future visitors. You can give a tour of your winery for some money. You can build a structure like a tasting room or a cottage or something like that, or you could grow your cellar. So let's say we're playing a 2-player game, only these left spaces would be available. So at the beginning, for example, in year 1, I might want to place my guy there, and then I'd be able to draw a visitor card, a vine card, sorry. And so this tells me what kind of grape I could grow in my field and how much it would get me when I harvest it. Okay, so on my turn, I might want to do a couple things. Now, I have to sort of spread these out because there's also winter actions as well. This is just the springtime actions. But let's say that I also wanted to then place one of those in a field. Well, that would be great, but in a solo game, there's no other players to stop me from doing any of that sort of stuff, so it would be kind of a boring exercise in just trying to maximize my score. So what the Automa system does is it's a deck of cards, and each of these simulates another player by filling up spaces to block me from being able to do them. Now, this is not a full AI in the sense that this player, this sort of non-person, is not actually doing the actions. They're just blocking you from doing them, because that's what other players do to you. That's what the interaction is in this sort of game. And so it's like a shell. So for example, if in the springtime, before I get to take any of these actions, I draw this card here, it tells me which of the actions to fill up with the Automa, with the AI. So it says build one structure, sell at least one grape, and play a summer visitor card. So I would have to put a person here, and a person, put a person here, and a person here. And the white ones aren't me, that's the AI. And now I can't do any of those things. So if I wanted to build a structure, I can't do that because it's blocked. And so I would do that again in future turns, drawing other cards. And so, for example, the next time around, I would block off the give tour to gain 2 lira space. So that's a situation where you're building a solo mode for a game by imagining what the other player, if it were multiplayer, what the other players would do to interact with me and how they would serve as an obstacle to my goals, and then building a sort of facsimile that gets to do those things just to kind of mess with me the way a real player might mess with me. So that's the Automa system. So hopefully you found these examples helpful in exploring some of the ways that people build solo board games.